everyone, it's Julie Murphy. It's been a while since I posted a video, but I've come up with a project that I think we'll all enjoy working on. Is go into my design center, or if you're on your Baby Lock, go into your IQ Designer. Our shapes button is right here. It's got the circle and the square. Let's see here, let's go into, the first button is our closed shapes. This is also a closed shape. So the first thing I'm going to do is choose this one that has the three little, they're like little teardrops. We'll say OK. And we are now going to go down here. We have our erase button, our select, and our size, and we're going to change the size. Now I'm working in inches, but I will also try and give measurements in millimeters. So to change the size, first thing we're going to do, right here it's telling us it's 3.68 by 6.56, and we're going to reduce it down to about 1.3 inches by 2.23 inches. In millimeters, that will be 33.1 by 56.6. So all we're going to do is hold this button that makes the design, this design, smaller. This button makes it just a little bit bigger, and as you can see, as I make it bigger, we're going up in just smaller increments. If we want to see what it looks like in millimeters, we can go up here to our little pad and just go over a page and change it from inches to millimeters. And there you go. We've got 33.1 by 56.2. Now, one thing I am working with as I'm trying to get all of this placed where I want it to be is I have this grid pattern on the back. So let me show you what we need to do to have that grid pattern. On here, I have mine set at 1 inch. And right now it's showing that we're going to be working with a 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop. That we can change depending on the size of the design that we're trying to do. But for right now, if you can just set yours on 1 inch. So the first thing that we're going to do is slide this up. And I'm using this center line here as a guide, and I want these two lower leaves to kind of sit on the line below it. And it just takes, we can use these little movement keys right here just to move things around. And we've moved this up 2 spaces from the center, and now what we're going to do is answer OK. And the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and place it on our clipboard by duplicating it. So we just hit the copy button right down here, and we'll move it off of the other one. And the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to try and make a circle out of these. And to do that, we're going to rotate using this button. And then we'll drag it up. Once we're happy with the position of it, and I'm pretty happy with that. It's now 2 over and 1 up, so we'll say OK. And this design is now on our clipboard, so we will just hit clipboard. We could also just duplicate, and we're going to rotate it and keep working around the circle. And so we are 2 over and 1 down. We'll say OK. Our clipboard. So we are 2 down. Okay, so now we have our circle of our little leaves or raindrops, and you can see the design up here in the viewing window. The next thing we need to do, now one thing that you might be tempted to do is go ahead and after we do this first one is capture, or let me say OK. You might be tempted to take the selection window and take these and just duplicate. You can do that you just have to be prepared for when you go to stitch out. It's gonna, if we take these and put them on this side, when we start stitching, all of this is gonna jump around instead of just doing one section at a time. So we're gonna go up here into our line regions box, and we're gonna choose the little piece of paper. And I want those to stitch out in a triple stitch. For right now, now remember, what I assign it does not mean it's the color I have to stitch it in. But I think for that, I'm going to say purple and OK. And then we're going to touch, remember, if we only have the pencil, then we're going to end up with a line like this. Well, that's not what we want. So all we have to do is do a back arrow. It gets rid of it. We're going to choose the bucket of the line property area. And we're just going to go around the circle and touch each of these little So that sound is letting us know we've already touched that leaf. So we're going to go back into our shapes button. And this time I think I'm going to choose this one that's got the little, looks almost like a flower outline. So we'll say OK. And you can see it's kind of put it right on top of our design. So the first thing we're going to do is make it smaller. So we're going to take the size and we're going to make the whole design smaller by using this key. That looks good. So we took it down to 3.48. So if we're happy with it, we'll say OK. We'll go right back into the line properties, choose the paper button, and decide what stitch we want to use. Do we want to do a satin, a single, a triple, candle wicking, or a chain stitch? For this one, I think what I'd like to do is actually assign it a chain stitch. And just so that I can change threads if I decide I would like to do that. We assigned it, the other one, the dark purple. This time I think I'll assign it a light purple. We'll say OK. And remember, we don't want the pencil, we want the bucket in the line region. And we'll say, so all we do is just touch somewhere on that line of the design we just placed in there. So the next thing we're going to do is I want to put a design inside of this design. So again, we'll go back into our shapes and let's go over to our other closed shapes. And I like this flower right here. So we'll say OK. And as you can see, it's now covering all of our designs. Don't panic, we're just going to go ahead, as long as we don't touch anywhere on the screen, we can adjust the size by shrinking that down. Now remember, we had the other one, I believe it was at 348, so we need to be smaller than that. And that looks pretty good. Maybe just a smidge bigger, maybe 255. I'm going to stick with 265 or 272. There you go. We'll say OK. And now I am going to rotate it a little bit so you can see how these are not exactly, let me zoom in for you. You can see how they're not exactly kind of lined up with our other shape. So now we're going to rotate. And we can make small adjustments here. And that looks pretty good. So we will leave it at that. So we'll say OK. And now I would like to change this to a triple stitch because right now we've left it at chain stitch, which is what we used for the design around it. So we'll go back into our line region, choose triple. Let's assign this one, let's say a pink color. And we can touch each one. Whoops, did you see what I did? As I didn't change it from pencil to bucket, so I've got a little dot on my screen. So all I do is undo it, go back into my bucket region, my bucket in the line region, and touch it. And I think I might actually make the center of it a different color. So I'll choose my paper, and because we were using a light pink, I think I'll go with a green. Now I don't have to stitch it this way, but it gives me the option when I get around to stitching it if I want to change the thread color. So now that we've got that done, let's make our design a little smaller. Now I didn't actually make the design smaller. That was our zoom feature up here where it just allows me to zoom in to see what we're actually doing. So now we've got our outer leaves, we've got our inner flower, and then we have our innermost flower with the circle in the middle. Now I would like to put a design around the outside. So again, we'll go back into the Shapes button. And for this one, I think I'm going to choose this design here. And you can see it's sitting right on top of our design. So we'll go back into our size button and we will make it bigger. Okay, that is 8.11, and I'm going to move it, actually I'm going to say okay, and I'm going to, do you see how this is not quite on the line? So I'm going to rotate that just in 1 degree increments. And that looks like it straightened it out just fine. So once you're happy with it, you'll say okay. And now we need to assign this outer design a color and a stitch. So our paper and our line region, and I would like it to do candle wicking. So I'll choose the candle wicking design, and I think I'll assign it a blue color. And we want to not use the pencil, we want to actually select the bucket, and we touch the outer rim of our design. So our design is set, and now what we want to do, let it zoom in so you can see how it looks. So you can see our various designs on the screen. Now what I'd like to do is fill some of this area in with a fill stitch. So the next thing we're going to do is go into our property regions area, which is the area just below the line region. So property region, and we'll choose the notepad. And for the first thing I'd like to do is go into and select a fill stitch or fill background. And for this one I'd like to choose number 10. And I'll say okay. And let's choose a color that we haven't selected as of yet. Now remember, what we select, we could obviously stitch this out in a white or whatever color we want to do it, but I want to be able to see it on my screen as I'm working. So I think for this I'm going to choose an orange color, and I'll say okay. And let me zoom in so you can see. We don't want the brush, that just gives us a paintbrush. Instead, we want to select the bucket of the property area. So now what we're going to do is touch this area in here. And it allows us to see the design as it fills in around our flower. Now, you're wondering why didn't it fill the whole design? And that's because this is a closed shape that goes around this interior flower. So now let's go back in and fill in. I think I might like to do a stippling around this other area. So let me zoom out just a bit. We're going to go back into our property area, and this time I'm going to choose a stippling. And again, I want to choose a color so I can see it on the screen. So I think this time I'm going to choose this teal color, and I'll say okay. And again, I don't want the brush, I want the bucket of the property area, and touch inside that design. Now at this point you need to be careful as you were copying and cutting and all of that with the design. You want to check and make sure all of your leaves are actually there and not filled in. If something's filled in, you can easily go back in and correct it. So if we're happy with how it's looking, we're going to choose next. And now this is where we're going to start making adjustments to our run pitch and our spacing and how far the distance is going to be from the side. So as you can see, the green of the stippling is what's selected right now. We have it at 0.08 and 0.2. I think what I'm going to do to start out with is I want to change the spacing. I'm going to take it down from a 0.2 to have it as a 0.8 as well. And you'll hear this, listen to this. That means that is the smallest the machine is willing to go to have a small spacing of this stippling. So if we're happy with it, we'll say set. The next thing we can do is I want the distance from the side to actually be 0. And that's as low as it'll go, so we'll say set. And now we want to go and adjust this color around the fill stitch around our flower. So we use these arrows here. So now you can see it is highlighted. So for this, I want to, you can see it has 100% of the design right now. We want to make that smaller by adjusting it down. Let's go down to 50%. And we'll set that. And right now, remember we actually assigned a stitch, but if we don't turn this off right now, it's going to give us an extra stitch. So we don't want the outline on. So we'll turn it off and say set. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hit preview. And that is what our design looks like. Now one thing, it's hard to see right now, but right in here, let me see if I can zoom in some. I don't know if you can see right here, we have a gap in our design. Now, it's not that big of a deal, but we can also go back in and change this background fill at this point. We can save it in the pocket, which I think that's what I'm going to do. And that's the pocket of the Design Center. Or if we hit set, it takes us out of the Design Center and takes us into the embroidery mode. But for now, I think I want to change this background. So I'm going to choose Return. And you'll notice that this section is actually highlighted. If it wasn't, we could actually just move our arrows here until the section we want to work on is highlighted. And so here is what we have so far. So we'll just touch this background fill and it allows us to go back in and change it. I think at this point we had chosen number 10. I think I would like to try number 3 and I'll say okay. Now remember, once we've chosen this, we've still got the same color. And it takes us back to the screen, and remember we had reduced this fill to about 50%. So we want to go back and redo that. We'll set it, and we'll take the outline of it off, and we will set that. And now we will go back into our preview function. We'll say okay, and it's going to bring it back up so we can re-preview with this new fill stitch. And that looks like a pretty good fill. And let me zoom in so you can see. Can you see that fill stitch? Now we've got a little bit of stitching in between everything. It's probably going to be quite a bit of a fill stitch, but I'd rather have a little too much to help almost give us like a trapunto effect with the flower petals than having a big gap between them. So once we're happy, we can go ahead and save this one more time into the pocket of the Design Center. And once we hit set, it will take us to the embroidery mode. And here are the colors that we've assigned it. Now there is a good chance, now you'll notice that our design is 8.24 by 8.24. Let me just change it so you can see what it is in metric. And it's 209 by 209. So we definitely are going to want to use our 9.5 by 9.5 inch hoop. So at this point, what I'm going to do is press embroidery. And you can see that it's going to cycle through. It's going to start with the green and work its way through the design. We can look at that by choosing this. And we can actually just cycle through. If there's a certain spot that we want to start, as long as we go back and restitch, we'll be able to do that. Okay, so we're back at the beginning, and once we're ready, we know that we're going to start with this the thread for this very tight stippling first. So let's go ahead and start stitching. Okay, we have everything all hooped up. I've got a selvage to selvage backing, a piece of batting, and a top layer. Now I'm ready to hoop. I have marked my center by folding the fabric in half, both lengthwise and widthwise, to come up with my center. I've marked with chalk my places where I would like to line it up in the hoop. And the next thing I wanted to show you is, I know each of us has our own way of hooping when we have so many layers, but if we're going to use a standard hoop, what I do is I loosen the tab all the way up. Well, not all the way, but I loosen it enough that once I know I have it right for my fabric, I can then just pop the top out without having to undo the screw. So let me show you what I do. So this is now loose. You can see that the top can move around. So I will slide that under. And the key here is just to take your time. Hooping is our most important thing to get our designs just right. I'm matching up on each side and I'm matching up top and bottom. I'm going to straighten out my fabric, slide it just a smidge, and then once I'm comfortable with where I have everything all lined up, I will start at the top and just work my way down until I pop it into the hoop. I'll tighten up my fabric. And once I know I've got that done, I will see if I need to tighten the screw at all. It actually doesn't need to be tightened. It's probably still adjusted from the last time that I did a quilt. So once I stitch this out, I'm not going to mess with the screw. I literally will just pop the top out and move the bottom hoop and then pop the top back in. So let's get started stitching.